This is the story of a journey that began almost 2 decades ago. A university came into being, faced with unyielding determination while embarking on a path of evolution. From the excitement of fresh beginnings to the struggles of overcoming obstacles, by nurturing brilliance and transforming ordinary minds into extraordinary visionaries, never losing sight of the collective vision. Driven by the belief that through education and unity, a brighter and better future is inevitable. Fueled by passion, with hearts charged up, ready to face countless years ahead. Forever producing brilliance, visionaries, and champions of change.
Hello. Hello.
So, introducing the next panel for tonight, Designing Pakistan, led by Dr. Mueed W. Yusuf as the chair of the session, led by Dr. Hafiz A. Pasha, Umar Shahid Hamid, and Sayyida Maureen Zaidi. I will be briefly introducing each of the panelists. And introducing Dr. Mueed Yusuf, Vice Chancellor of Beacon House National University, Pakistan's first not-for-profit liberal arts university. He was previous the National Security Advisor and Special Assistant to Prime Minister of Pakistan. He holds a master's in international relations and a PhD in political science from Boston University. Next up, we have Dr. Hafiz A. Pasha, Professor Emeritus and Head of Center for Public Policy, BNU Lahore. Dr. Pasha is a distinguished economist and an academic. He has held several important public appointments in Pakistan, including the Federal Commerce Minister, Federal Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs, Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, and Education Minister in 3 different governments. He's also served as the UN Assistant Secretary General and Director of the Regional Bureau of Asia and the Pacific of UNDP. Dr. Pasha has an MA from Cambridge University and a PhD from Stanford. He has published over 150 books and articles on various topics such as public finance, poverty, social development, industry, energy, and energy economics. Next, we have Mr. Umar Shahid Hamid, a Deputy Inspector General with 23 years of experience as a police officer. He took a sabbatical in 2011 to study in the UK and then returned to service in 2016, rising to become the head of the Counterterrorism Department and Provincial Chief of the Intelligence Bureau. He's also an acclaimed author, having written 5 best-selling novels, with The Party Worker contracted for a Netflix adaptation. Next, we have Ma'am Sayyida Maureen Zaidi, Senior Vice President Zindagi, powered by JS Bank. She has been practicing in the corporate sector since 2007, specializing as an in-house legal counsel to various organizations, heading legal, regulatory, and corporate governance teams, spearheading various special projects, transactional structures focused on business and asset transfers. She holds an LLM from the University of Manchester. May I please invite Dr. Mueed Yusuf to come. Lastly, please allow me to introduce Mr. Hasib Gardezi, Chief Operating Officer, Hospitality and Education Division at Hashu Group. Mr. Hasib Gardezi is the CEO, as I've already mentioned. He's responsible for managing the largest chain of 5-star, 4-star, and select service hotels in Pakistan. Being a C-level professional with over 27 years of diversified senior management, leadership, and hospitality experience, he has played a pivotal role in the expansion and development of the hospitality industry and sustainable infrastructure in Pakistan. Moreover, he has also successfully launched Pakistan's first premier tourism and hospitality management school in collaboration with CTH UK by the name of Hashu School of Hospitality Management. He's a certified management and hospitality professional from Cornell School of Hotel Administration, USA. May I please request the panel to continue with the talk? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. The best news for tonight is I'm not going to say anything. We're here to listen to our very esteemed panel. 3 days of conversations around design. And one of the things I asked the anchor of this design summit, Professor Kiran, is what do I have to do with this? And thankfully, Dr. Pasha asked the same question about 15 minutes ago of me, so I wasn't too far off. But I have understood why we are here. And that's exactly what defines BNU, which is think out of the box, think innovation. So if you think of design as something that only artists would do and think, that's where we go wrong. So today we are gathered here to talk about designing and redesigning Pakistan. We keep talking about what's wrong with us. We keep talking about what's going wrong with the country. Well, here's an opportunity to hear some of the best minds in the country from very different perspectives. We've got somebody who's spent an entire life looking at economics and our economy, somebody who represents the corporate banking sector and is engaged also with the youth and digitization in that space. Umar, who's probably one of the, not probably, is one of the best known writers of Pakistan, and a police officer who's seen security very, very up close and personally in terms of where he's sat. And then Hasib Saab, who, as you've heard, runs the largest hospitality chain, and tourism we keep talking about as one of the industries that has great potential. So let me begin by asking Dr. Pasha, and we'll move down after that. Pasha Saab, ye bataiye, we know all the problems. I think we know many of the solutions. Why don't things change?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A very appropriate question, and in a way refers to the wrong design in some ways that we are talking of. Ladies and gentlemen, the problem we have in design is the wrong blending of the 3 P's: people, power, and policy. Now, what does this mean? The wrong blending of the 3 P's. This is basically because in Pakistan, we have an imbalance between the access to power and the ability to influence policy by a very select, if you like, if I may use the word, elite of the country. This elite has been able to swing and change policies in such a way that they have generally tended more to benefit this very select, hardly 1% of the population, rather than the majority of the people of our country. And the end result is that today, I will just give you one example. Pakistan today has one of the lowest tax ratios with respect to the size of the economy. Out of 100 rupees of income generated in Pakistan, we collect hardly 9 rupees of taxation. How can a country develop with such a low revenue base? And why is this revenue low? Because we have given unbelievable, wide-ranging exemptions, reliefs, rebates, lower tax rates, so on and so forth, to the select elite consisting of the feudal elite, with all due respect, some of the corporate entities, the bureaucracy, and of course, the very exclusive elite in the establishment. So, ladies and gentlemen, unless there is broader participation of the people at large in the process of identification and decisions on the kind of policies to be adopted, that is the reason why Pakistan is unable to move ahead and inequality continues to rise. And I'm afraid today, I'm really sorry to say, over 40% of the people of our beloved country are below the poverty line. This is a great, great tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you, Pasha Saab. You've got to get more optimistic than that in the next round, please. But I think one of the things you've mentioned, and perhaps Ms. Eddy, you could address this, corporate sector. You know, the concern with the public sector, it's inefficient, it's bulky, there's red tape, perhaps there's rent seeking. But there is also a critique on the private sector, that rather than getting into innovation, rather than thinking about how to support the economy, the private sector also remains very consumed by rent seeking, by traditional means of business, and if I may say so, by trying to convert public money into private money to then again follow rent seeking models. What would you say?
Thank you. I think that's a very insightful question, and I unfortunately would agree. I recall that when I started working in the corporate sector, it was a very sort of a point in time where a lot of innovation and development and technology was taking place. I'll give you one small example. When I started working and I would look at the landscape of the country, I would look at maybe 15 or 20 odd, very ugly looking telecom towers, and I would say, why do we have so many of these towers that destroy the landscape? Not only that, but they're also not very good for human health. And this initiative began where there was a very, very focused effort on trying to share an infrastructure where different mobile operators could, put their equipment on. Yet, perhaps the rent seeking or the monetizing aspect or sort of having that hold on certain prime areas to provide coverage, there was a very, on top of it, everybody wanted to, they want to collaborate and they wanted to, share infrastructure, but there was a very, very sort of conscious effort to block that. Having said that, I have seen, very unfortunately, quite a lot of models where you will look at something which is for provision of certain service. A common consumer would not understand what an administrative fee is. He would not ask. Yet it is charges that are being charged onto a customer, and you're monetizing from the customer, and you're hiding, that you're charging an additional sort of a percentage for your own good. I think we still have a long way to go in terms of providing some sort of cashback benefits, in providing some sort of subsidies, and to allow enabling sort of staggered services for people who cannot sort of afford a certain kind of a service because of the economy and the state and the dire state of affairs that we're in. And I believe there's this trust deficit that sort of handicaps the corporate sector. I think the customers at large feel a bit apprehensive when there's a corporate and private corporate entity involved and that's offering them a benefit. And at the same time, I believe we also have to as part, and I believe whether private or public, everyone that works in this country must be patriotic. Whether you are a foreign entity that spearheads a business in this country, you have to respect this country. You earn from this country. You have to pay those taxes. So you cannot make shell entities and avoid tax and look at tax efficient ways. But I think it's something that as a nation we all need to be cognizant of.
Thank you. Well said. Let me move to Umar, we were just having a conversation before we came, and Umar raised this point about narrative and national narrative. So, Umar, maybe we can go there. If you were to put on your literary hat for a second, um, get into the world that you think of and conceive so naturally and so beautifully, what is my country's story, and why doesn't it sell?
What is our story? It's the question that all of us have been asking, right? Stories are important, and I say this as a writer, and it sounds very self-serving, but stories are important. Stories are what you build countries around. Stories are what you build nations around. Some stories are myths, but they become part of what we call a national narrative, right? If you are an American or if you're a Chinese citizen, you kind of know what your national narrative is. If you're an American, you've got it boiled down to a bumper sticker, right? The land of opportunity. We are, and with all the talk of everything else, we talked about economics and security and all of that. If you go around this country, you go to Balochistan, you go to KPK, Karachi, anywhere else in Punjab, we talk a lot about narrative. The tagline of narrative, Bayaniya, is everywhere, and yet we don't have a story. What is our story? Have we? And I think that is, to me, it boils down to our original sin that we've never really been able to fashion a narrative in 70 years. What is our story? I mean, we could have opted for a number of stories over the course of these past 75 years, or more perhaps now, but we haven't. We're still struggling with that, and if you ask me to look at it from my literary hat, as I look at it from my literary hat, I find that this is the key issue that plugs into all the other issues. You have to figure out what our story is before we start dealing with all of our other, whether those issues be economic, whether they be security driven, or anything else. We've got to find our story.
And I'll come back to this to ask how to do that. But let me go to Mr. Gardezi. Asif Saab, the government I was part of not too long ago, tourism was a big deal. You heard conversations about tourism, and this is what's going to turn Pakistan around, or one of the big sectors. There's a lot of potential. Of course, your entire career has been in this space, one way or another. We all get potential, but I'll quote one of my old sports coaches who used to say that potential is a curse word. And when you asked him why, he would say, all you're telling me is you've never achieved anything in life. So we have a lot of potential. होता क्यों नहीं?
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। सर देखें, पहली बात तो ये word tourism in Pakistan. Question is for who we are talking about. So you go to different people, different sector, government, they all have got a different definition for it. You ask somebody, they say, oh, we went to XYZ country, this is thriving with tourism, and there was this life and that life. We must first understand tourism for who. In Pakistan, our domestic tourism is next to very limited. All countries that we talk about in tourism, they all have achieved this tourism excellence through first domestic tourism. Now question is, when you talk about, Dr. Saab was talking about the economy and all that. And the government, what government does when government comes in and start talking about tourism, they are elite. So they only call the people who are 5-star, they will call the Hashu group, they will call Awari, they will call Serena, and start talking about the policy. For who? For the people who are just 5% who afford 5-star services. Now, when you look at the data that is given every year with GP by KPK, millions of tourists travel. So these millions of tourists, when they travel, what they do? They don't have place to go to a loo. They don't have any facility for these people who are million. And They don't have that kind of dispensable income. So what happens, whichever area they travel, because they don't have enough dispensable income, they actually do not improve the economy of that place. They actually destroy the habitat of that place. So when I said that, Pakistan is beautiful and Pakistan must try that at least. I'm asking the audience today as a conscious question. How many of us have traveled to Balochistan, Quetta, Peshawar? You would hardly get an answer, but you expect rest of the world to visit us when we are not ready to visit our own place. Now, since COVID, why the domestic tourism has increased? For reasons. Once we were locked for 2 years, we had no place to go. Plus, it is very expensive due to the ever rupee devaluation that it becomes very difficult for most of us to travel abroad. And that's why we said, okay, we want to go there. The private sector, the government sector, the public sector, they all come up. Do you have a conclusive tourism policy of the country? Now, when your government was there, one of the big conventions, I said, look, we talk about millions of people going in KPK and GB. Don't do anything. Come up, for goodness sake, a camping site where people just go there, park their car and do the camping site. And it is being managed by services are managed. We talk about it. Everybody talks to go and do things, but I think the question is, and then the biggest problem that I feel after the amendment in the constitution, when the tourism was taken away from the center to the provinces, we have got now 5 or 6 policies. So that's why I think there has to be a conclusive national policy, be it government, be it private sector, and everybody think selflessly, not selfishly, and then only then we can develop. And our focus should be first the domestic tourism before we start looking others to look at us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Saif, if I may come back to you. Human security. You've talked about elite capture. I think Garderi Sahib has put it very nicely. You're talking about the 5% who can afford 5 stars. I think the theme is pretty much the same. There isn't a story and the corporate sector is doing what it is. I know you've been working on human security. I know the picture is very bleak, but if you could talk to us a little bit about what this human security paradigm may bring for Pakistan if we were to move in the right direction based on your work.
Thank you for a very, I think, important and key question. You see, the reason why we have moved towards this concept of human security is because I must say that one of the starting points was the wonderful national security policy prepared by our Vice Chancellor in 2022 for 2022 to 2026. And one of the very important breakthroughs in that security policy was an attempt was made, perhaps for the first time, to move away from the concept of arms or military security towards a broader vision of human security. And that security policy also put economic security as central to the lives of the people. So well done, Vice Chancellor Saab. And this was a starting point for our work. So we said, let us try and now operationalize this concept of human security and go beyond the traditional notion in Pakistan, which is on territorial and military security. Ladies and gentlemen, we have spent over a year working on this, and I'm pleased to report to you that a book has recently been launched on human security in Pakistan, with me, of course, as the lead author. But it has received a lot of response, and I'm pleased to say that it has generally broadened the scope of the discussion on what matters for the lives of the people of Pakistan. The first is we have to find ways of giving more freedom to our people from fear. And what is this fear? This fear is fear of crime, fear of terrorism, fear of natural disasters, fear of epidemics, so on. That is one very important dimension that we have to improve of human security. The second dimension is freedom from want. And that means basically food security, energy security, education, health, so on. And the third and very, very important dimension of human security in the Pakistani context is freedom from exploitation, inequality, and oppression. And finally, the fourth dimension is access to the broad range of human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, we have actually constructed a human security index from our country with 87 indicators spread over a period of over 20 years. And let me tell you that the overall index of human security is inverted U-shaped, which means that our human security condition improved from 1999-2000 to 2015-16, and unfortunately, has deteriorated since then, with particularly external financial vulnerability becoming a dominant negative factor. I'm pleased to report to you that we have recently been asked to extend this work and update this annually, and Beacon House National University has been given this assignment, and inshallah, this index of human security will become in future an index of the performance of Pakistan as a country and as a way of measuring the extent of improvement in the lives of our beloved people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhaisa. Zaidi, we've beaten up on the private sector, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised by your response. But the group you represent, Zindagi is one platform, of course, you're connected to. There's a lot of focus. I must tell everybody that JS Bank has actually sponsored a one of its kind chair, academic chair at BNU on green finance and fintech. We're also partners in working on digitization of BNU as a campus, also party to the Design Summit. Innovation. Why would JS Bank or Zindagi be interested in the Design Summit? In the digitization part, I understand, but your approach to the youth, I find, is quite refreshing. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. I think one of the main reasons that I chose to work with the JS Group was the fact that it allows us to very candidly reflect upon the real state of affairs and where the problem statement lays and what we need to address. Basir Saab, Imran Saab, Numan that I work with, at the basis of and at the very top of JS, I find it to be an extremely patriotic group of people who want to work for the betterment of Pakistan. When I think Zindagi is an initiative, and it's sort of a dream project that started maybe 2 years ago. It's quite young. And I'll give you an example on how it has helped us in terms of including the youth of the country financially. I think the Gen Zs and I guess Gen Alphas that are going to be coming on, my daughter is one of those, so I don't even know what they will be capable of. I find this generation to be so intelligent and so well-read and so well-informed. The concept behind creating minor accounts, allowing people who are younger than 18 years of age to be financially included, it's essentially empowering your child, giving them the ability to be able to use an app and customize it as per their needs and wants. Introduce concepts such as virtual cards, where they can be monitored, and at the same time that understanding of being financially prudent comes from a very young age. With students, again, we've also found, and especially with BNU, I think one of the main reasons that JS is very passionate about BNU is the wonderful initiatives that BNU has been leading. And I think, again, it's the factor that connects us is the patriotism at the start of it. Digitizing student fee. Digitizing the fact that a student is so sensible that if you allow a student to make use of a facility such as mutual funds or stocks, they're very wise. I've seen students literally save up 5,000 rupees a month in mutual funds and it monetizes and they don't touch it for a year. And our mutual fund investments have now gone up to people investing about 800,000 rupees per month. And it's a way of monetizing it. I think we allow that ease of payments. Students have to be, and I've been a student very long ago, not any time, nearer to this one. But I think it's a time where, running around and those expenses you have to be very cognizant of. So having the ability to be able to pay a merchant at your campus through an app is quite it creates life, it makes life easier. It helps you save up on your commute to going and paying a certain bill, or I think it should, the fact that you're able to earn a certain amount of money monetize over your savings, because it is essentially a public money that a bank is entrusted with, whether it is a student or whether it is a banking as a service standard account. I'll give you an example of one of the star projects of Zindagi, which is Zindagi Prize. We had about 130 universities from Pakistan attend this event, and these students had brilliant ideas, and these students came from universities that I frankly had not even heard of. They were in areas that I didn't think were as developed, and that was ignorant on my part. And there were concepts such as an app called DigiLawyer. And now, after that whole event went through, there's an incubator concept called Kangaroo Care, developed by students, that's been incubated by JS Group, and we're funding it, and we're hoping to keep increasing that particular involvement. Another example I'll give you, I was very surprised. It is those FC Jawans that are in the trenches at the border. They have no act. They don't come home for months. They get a nominal salary of about maybe 15 to 20,000 rupees. And by the time that salary would reach their houses, it would, somebody would have, taken some commission, 2,000 rupees for transferring, which is not even there. And now Zindagi, through Zindagi JS, allowed that capability of those salaries hitting their accounts immediately, so the Jawan can sit there and pay those salaries. Likewise, I will give you an example of the digital challan. I think we all know how notorious, our traffic wardens have been in terms of, how they would just stop you and just, you would pay cash. And now, we've gone completely, the challans have gone digital. A policeman, at least in the ITP, the traffic police can no longer, say on his walkie-talkie that I'm at duty, and he's actually sitting at home. We've given them a device and a tracker. So, that need and that cost is finished. So I think also with BNU, it is just that at the course where I think the good that will come out, that this frustration and anger that the youth feels, because they know they're intelligent, but they feel that they don't have that control over the circumstance, I think is one of the things that we look at.
Excellent. Thank you. I think the students are going to be very happy because of the cashless fees payment. We've also made fines cashless. That means more fines. I don't think they're going to be too happy with that. Umar, now to your security hat. We talk a lot about where does the rubber meet the road when it comes to Pakistan's problems. Let me give you a proposition. I think the mother of all failures is the failure of dispensation of justice and rule of law. Because what I can get away with in this country, 99% can't.
Absolutely. And again, it's also, when I link it back to what I said earlier about what's our story, right? It depends on where you sit to kind of understand that point. And I'll relate an anecdote when I was in Balochistan a couple of years ago. And I drove from, I was posted this, I drove from Gwadar to Turbat, which is a 1.5 hour drive, right? And in a 1.5 hour drive, there are 18 checkpoints manned by every possible law enforcement agency under the sun. I mean, I've been in this job for 23 years and I found there are a couple of new ones, sorry, manning checkpoints over there. So I got to Turbat and I met up with a dear friend, a colleague who was also a member of the security services. And I said, yeah, well, like, what's the deal with this? And he said, because at that time, these checkpoints had become a hot button issue. And obviously, my car went through, but you could see that a number of people were stopped right there. And it's the same thing about the point that you raised. So my friend said, yeah, the guys over here, the locals, are really riled up about this, and their protests in Gawadar, and they're blocking the CPEC port and stuff like that. But I don't get it. Like, what's the problem? I mean, look, I'm from Islamabad. The police have nakas in Islamabad. Do we complain when any of us are stopped at a naka in Islamabad? And he was a friend, and I didn't state the obvious that, but Turbat is in Islamabad. If you could maybe make it a little more like Islamabad, perhaps people would be less ticked off. But that is actually at the crux of it, right? That it is, we view things from different, and I don't blame my friend. That's his point of view, and that point of view is reflective of the world that he comes from, right? That's a world where there is order, where what's wrong with, stepping aside and being searched if it's in the greater good for security. But that's not the world, and that's not the story that is seen or told by a Baloch man in walking from Gawadar to Turbat, right? Because he sees these people who are largely not local stopping him again and again, whereas he sees another person in a big SUV and an accent that is not local being waved right through those same checkpoints. And he says, I've been on this land for 2,000 years. You guys are the guests. So why are you checking me 18 times? So, we have to have this conversation. And we talk a lot about, okay, this is wrong and all that. But I think that's where I keep coming back to this thing about narrative and our story. We've got to have this conversation because a narrative or a national story can't be imposed from above, right? It has to kind of be a bottom-up approach. We have to kind of create our stories collectively. Okay, this is what we're about. And we've got to at least start having that conversation, because we will disagree. 100% we'll disagree, because the way that you look at the story of this country is very different from the way that I look at it, right? But until and unless we start having the conversation, and I think the world that we come from, I think we tend to have a viewpoint that we put off this conversation until we say that, until we've imposed order or until we've solved the sort of kinetic problem, we'll come to this later, because this is all your sort of narrative, or tum writer type ho, or tum ye bayaniya shayaniya ki baatein karte ho. So think, but actually, I mean, there are countries that have had, India has, over the last 40 years, 3 or 4 multiple insurgencies, low-running insurgencies at any one time, but they still develop a narrative, right? The same with China. So we've got to start having the conversation. We can't put off the conversation until we solve the problem.
Thank you. Anytime one gets stuck in a conversation on foreign policy, which is partly where I come from, the cop-out statement is, first put your own house in order, and then we'll talk about it, as if we can wait to figure out how to deal with the world. So I take your point. Gadei Sahab, and I'll open it up after this for questions. Your group has also partnered with us. By the way, to have the only 4-year degree in hospitality management, or the first one in Pakistan. But I still think the industry is not understood. And I learned more about it as I was going through this process with you. But I wonder whether you want to speak to the industry, the hospitality management industry, and why should I believe that it is as important for Pakistan as you've always told me it is?
See that there are cliches and there are slogans that we keep on talking about. Like you said, in last government, there was a lot of talk about tourism, 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 tourism. You see, the biggest problem is that if you look at some of the economies which are not like us, but are progressing, like Philippines, Thailand, you see the vocational education has always been on the top. I mean, today look at Dubai. Dubai, if you want to see any hotel or any place where you have got a beautiful flower setup, you ask them, mostly it's Filipinos. You ask a carpenter, is a Filipino. You ask any trade. Now, going back even to the European economies, Germany is now doing so much of effort on vocational. They say that, look, developing an engineer and all that does not sort out a problem. We need more plumbers, we need more welders, we need more people who can have the van, their own workshop, go to places and places and earn, and they turn around the economy. Look at us, most of that, and I should not shy away. Any place where there is a little bit of hospitality, even I tell you the offices, and I'll say that even sometime in an army, you receive a call from one of army officer and say, look, Hasib, we are having a mess, but we have a problem. Our people does not know how to serve a cup of tea, right? They don't have institution to go to and say, look, we are looking for 10 waiters or 20 housemen, and please give it to us. So first of all, the most important part is, okay, you go to Shahi Mosque and a foreigner wants, or somebody who has come from outside want to know about Shahi Mosque. You would have somebody who is developed over a period of time from word to word to tell you something, the story about that place. But is that an authentic history he's telling or not? There are trades that the government and the public sector need to invest in that, the universities and colleges. Look at that, we are in hospitality for so long, but it's the first time ever that BNU and Hashu Group are now doing a first degree in Pakistan. There has been no hospitality degree. And what happens is every time we train an individual, we lose him to any other economy or a country who gives them a better salary. We need a nursery that keeps on growing into trees after every year, every 6 months and all that. So I think there is a lot of potential. Now, I went to Cornell for my hospitality, and you know, I had the batch of 26 students with me. I think we are the only 2 who are doing the jobs. All 24s are entrepreneurs. Somebody has the wineries, somebody has got the restaurant chains, some got as a hotel chains. And when it comes to tourism, we only feel hotels. There are travel agencies, there are tour operators. There's so much out there that is not structured. And if this industry is put to a structure, there is going to be huge employmentability, and there is going to be a great skill development at every level, from a senior level to a junior level. I think you have done a great job, like you have done many others, in collaborating to have the first hospitality degree in Pakistan, and you'll see how you empower the youth from just becoming an employee to an entrepreneur.
I think we're going to literally get a taste of what the industry can do tonight.
Absolutely. Hope so.
Thank you. So let me open it up and see if anybody wants to react, respond, ask anything of our guests, maybe our international guests who are here, if there's any thought. And as you gather your thoughts, let me get a quick fire round, if I can, from our panelists. Top 3 things to do in your sector to redesign Pakistan. 1, 2, 3, sir.
On the economic front, number 1 priority, in line with what I have been saying earlier, progressive reforms to bring the elite into the economic system, and that progressive set of reforms to lead to the generation of resources for providing pro-poor social protection, including, for example, vocation and technical education and other such programs. So this is fundamental redistribution of wealth and income in this country. The second one, very quickly, which I would like to emphasize in the Pakistani context, is we have to become much more external and, if you like, focused on issues of external vulnerability. You'll be amazed, there was a time in Pakistan's history when we were considered as one of the most progressive exporting nations in the world, with a remarkable, if you like, mechanisms like the bonus voucher scheme and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that died a natural death, and we shifted towards inefficient import substitution through massive cover given in the form of tariff protection. Pakistan has to now focus on external market, has to focus on innovation, which has already been said by the other participants. It has to really focus now on trying to balance our external books, not by artificially curtailing even essential imports, but promoting and diversifying our exports. And lastly, Pakistan, ladies and gentlemen, has unfortunately fallen in the Human Development Index from a medium development country now to a low human development country. We are bracketed with sub-Saharan countries today. Human development, human security, this is of fundamental importance for the people of our country. Otherwise, there may come a time when moving ahead will become, unfortunately, very difficult for the country and for its people. That's my 3 points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I really fully agree with you. I think from my perspective, very quickly, it would be fundamentally number one, would be rule of law and governance. It is absolutely pertinent. Second would be accountability and criteria. And in terms of, I think we suffer where we write off debts and loans for those who can do it. And I think it is the third one is absolutely, for me, diversity, equality, and inclusion does not restrict itself to a gender. I think it is access to justice. It is for every age bracket. It is for all, genders that are out there. So I think that opportunity and DEI in all walks of life is something where I think socially we need to focus on.
Very, very quickly, we need to train ourselves to think critically. We need to train ourselves to think more creatively, and we need to train ourselves to talk to each other.
I think, sir, I think it may be a loud order. I think the tourism should become the central subject again. This is very important, and the people who are thinkers, this reform is important. Other thing is the tourism should be run by people who know the destination development and not by running a bureaucratic office or anything. And lastly, that tourism in all sense should be driven as a economic improvement for the country, because every $1 out of $10 is produced by tourism across the world, and it should able to do it within ourselves also. And we should speak much higher about our country when we sit on any media, instead of bashing our country all the time. And I'll give you one example. We have been told while we were in the school that the best part of Kashmir is with India and we are left with nothing. It's a very bad part. But when you now go to Azad Kashmir and Muzaffarabad, the beauty that we have is that we are not explored. Let's talk good about Pakistan. Let's talk good about our destination. And the tourism development has to run by the experts who are the destination development people and not anybody else.
Thank you. Last call. Questions? Yes. We can get the mic there, please.
So I urge was discussed. Dr. Moeed, you were with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you were the National Security Advisor. We know the problems, as you said. One of the problems, and I think one of the prime most problems that we have is the image problem, which relates to the narrative and the history. And of course, in comparison to other countries in South Asia like India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, if we are to publish a book of history for each of these countries, you know how the title page, the book cover would look like. What would be the visual on that? We have never exerted any muscle internationally, as we have to look externally, as Pasha Sahib has mentioned. What has been our effort to also look at ways of cultural exchange and soft diplomacy and soft power? So that addresses probably half of the problems that we have talked about here: tourism, to economic development, to image, narrative. So one of these questions is this. And the other thing is, to our honorable panelists from JS Bank, I think banks in the last 2 or 3 years have probably benefited the most out of the instability in this country. If you are to look at the revenues of banks in comparison to other corporates, probably you'll see that there's a surge. And then banks come up with these silver bullet solutions, like coming up with an app for Generation Z and incubator, not talking about the ecosystem around that incubator. So why do you need an incubator? Is not to just have an edifice like an infrastructure. You really, really want to create entrepreneurs. Microfinance ke andar dekh lein aap kya ho raha hai Pakistan ke andar. I mean, with the exceptions of Akhwat, we have very few other financial institutions that are providing the kind of microfinance that this country needs. And what are you doing in terms of venture capital investments, also? The other thing that you talked about is dealing with Generation Z. Well, looking at Generation Z from the point of view of a parent is very different than actually knowing what Generation Z is. You have to actually sit with them as equals and allow them to speak to you in their language, and you probably should have the ability to speak back to them, not at them, in the same language. They may address you by your first name. Do we have that, tolerance, respect for this generation, as we should have that? So I'm sorry, these are just very academic questions. Please don't take it as a critique, but...
No, thank you. I mean, that's why we are here. Let me see if there are any others, and then we'll just ask. G, please, back there. Achha, idhar bhi hai? Sorry. So let's go there first. And Professor Kiran, the real boss, is beginning to stare at me, so I'm looking at the clock.
I've really missed the talk, but one question was there in my mind before coming here. We all talk about reforms and images and narratives, but if they don't narrate with the truth, how can we sell it? And secondly, we talk about changing the systems, but what about changing the mind behind the system? What I feel as growing up, that the character of Pakistanis is like, it's not very easily sellable.
Sure.
So what have we done for character building, and what are the role models? Can you show me few role models in the society now? And then whenever we can't do anything, we bring religion in it.
Sure.
So what should be the role of religion in our society?
Okay. Any, Ramaz, if you don't mind, can we have last question here, and then we'll come back and wrap it up.
So the question is to everybody here, but perhaps Moeed, you as well, because you are a face of policy and effective policy, and so we have these fine experts in their fields, and as somebody who's 40 plus right now, I've always wondered, can we have these experts who have all these suggestions, they want to do all this amazing work for them, and perhaps Umar, you can also shed some light on this. I've always found that jo public servant hai, if they're not completely like, the Ministry of Tourism is not run by somebody like you, for example, and you have deep expertise in that. And I'm just wondering, like, you come from public service. Do you not feel like maybe there should be more alignment in, top-down ownership of expertise. I just feel like as somebody in my age, and the reason I'm asking you, Omar, is because I think, this pertains really to CSS and basically, public service. And I feel like there's people with very varied degrees, and they are the McKinseys of public service because they can solve everything. I think it's time for experts to step in. It'd be really fun. It'd be really nice.
Sure. Let me go back to the panel. Any question you want to pick and respond? Juma.
I'll start with the last one. It's a very valid point, right? Because I think when we talk about redesigning or reimagining Pakistan was something that Shahid Khaqan Abbasi was doing a while back, right? Sorry.
Others have done it before too.
Others have done it endless times. Part of the problem is that I think we're still stuck in many kind of structures that, and this is a very controversial viewpoint, certainly amongst my colleagues and perhaps amongst members of the panel as well. So we have the structure of a civil service, and we have this kind of concept that it's this disinterested, British-style, neutral civil service. And that's not the case anymore, right? And we can play a blame game, कि किसकी गलती है, but the fact is it's not that anymore. So, and it's obviously not delivering the way that it's supposed to deliver. So I've actually had this, and which is why I say it's a controversial point of view. I've had this conversation with colleagues where I've said, well, perhaps we should move to a model where, like in China, or for that matter in the US, you have an overtly politicized civil service, right? So in China, if you want to go beyond a certain level, you have to be a member of the Communist Party, right? Even if you want to head the National Shipping Corporation or whatever. So you have to buy into the ideology of the party, right or wrong or whatever. Similarly, with the change of every US administration, there's something like 4,000 jobs that starting with cabinet level secretaries and going down to sort of mid-level people who are staffed by Democrats or Republicans, depending on whoever's come to power, which means that the policy formulation is a more genuine reflection of the policies of that party. And it can go wrong as well. People have criticized, for instance, the Trump White House or whatever. But at least that party can say, okay, this is our vision, right? You may disagree with it, but it's our vision and this is how we're executing it. Because what we have right now is a sort of, Aadha Titar, Aadha Bater kind of thing, which isn't really helping anyone. So, and you can understand that my point of view is a controversial one, because a lot of my colleagues feel कि this is तुम तो गुनाह कबीरा कर रहे हो कि तुम कह रहे हो कि ये तो civil service जो है वो इस तरह होनी नहीं चाहिए. But if you can't deliver that disinterested, neutral civil service, then you've got to think of alternatives, right? You've got to think of out-of-the-box solutions.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to focus on what may turn out eventually, unfortunately, to be the negative implications of the absence of effective policy formulation in Pakistan and its implementation for the benefit of the majority of our people. And I'm going to speak about one particular segment of our society which is sitting here today, most of them, and that is the youth of Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, our recent research at the Bacon House Center for Policy Research has revealed the exponential increase in the number of idle youth in Pakistan. Idle youth are youth who are either in the labor force trying to get jobs but are unable to find them, or it includes those who are, of course, not in the education system but have given up trying for jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, the population of youth in this country is relatively high because Pakistan is characterized by a youth bulge because of its high population growth rate. The number of youth is on the right side of 61 million. But do you know, ladies and gentlemen, what is the number of idle youth in your country today? The number I will quote you is of a staggering large magnitude. 21 million youth of Pakistan are idle today. And why I'm emphasizing this is this sense of despair, disillusionment, and lack of any sense of being part of the mainstream will, unfortunately, we have seen idle youth elsewhere in the world lead to Arab Spring type consequences. Khuda na kare, aisa ho. Magar we have to be very careful. We have already got some messages. The recent elections, for example, have conveyed a signal to us. For God's sake, that remarkable, privileged elite of Pakistan has to get its act together. And we have to absorb and involve and give a sense of participation of this 21 million youth of our country. With all my sadness, I stop here. Thank you.
So, to address your question, firstly, I think I will take the Gen Z aspect first. Being a parent and being a Pakistani, I am a staunch believer of what we call talim wa tarbiyat, or education and upbringing. I think it is absolutely necessary for one to augment the other. So while we may educate our children, we must always teach them a set of values. So I think that open communication is possible. I have it with my children. I've had it with my parents. I've not been part of this, but I know, in certain ways, I know my child will never speak to me on a first name basis. It's how I've raised her. Having said that, I think most of us would agree that as, I think the moral sort of upbringing and moral kind of values that we need to inculcate in our children, in our youth, in fact, even how we speak to one another, how we speak to people at work, how we may speak to somebody who's perhaps working at a lower position or doing a job which is considered not, very top-notch. I think generally that respect is something that we had in this country. It's still there, but we seem to be losing on it. So I think it's very important for us to preserve that. So talim wa tarbiyat is something that I think is very important, which allows a nation to progress. Your second question, which is very, very correct, that yes, banks have monetized. We live in a country where I think the tax bracket for the banking sector went from a 59% to a 62%. Yet there are banks that became cognizant of the fact that perhaps it may do benefit to the country if we were to start investing that money wisely to increase the FDI that comes into the country through international remittance and through expansion as well. When I speak of Zindagi, and the reason that I joined it, literally on a day's notice, is when I met Numan Azhar, the CEO of Zindagi. His patriotism about how he wants this country to progress is something that I share as a value. We don't look at Zindagi as a bank. We look at it as a fintech. It is an organization that completely has developed its enterprise stack in-house. So whatever we will give to a customer, even as a payroll service or a digitization service, it is all owned, made, worked on in Pakistan. All of that amount stays, the money that we pay, the investments, the licenses we get, they stay within this country. So I think and it's one of the first organizations that I know that pride on housing that enterprise locally. And I think, because there's not a business forum in a short of time, but we have, there is an international expansion that is ongoing, and that is to, make it easy for foreign overseas Pakistanis to send across funds and remittance into Pakistan. And there's a lot of very, very exciting work that we inshallah wish to launch in this year, and in Afghanistan, in countries like Oman, Saudi Arabia. That is the next developing economic corridor that's there. It's the UK as well. So I would like to give you some positive hope that we will not let you down and fall within the cadre of those the quintessentially evil commercial banks that you mentioned. So thank you.
Sip sir, any last word?
Yeah. Youth today is unemployed and all that. I think there is a lot of difference between it's illusion and reality. The social media is playing a very difficult role in that. You know that when we started in our time the careers, so we never thought that overnight we will become rich and tomorrow I will have 100,000 as a salary, and the expectation of the students that are coming out of the institutions immediately want to have reached to the level which literally needs experience. And I think this is something that we, the educational institution, has also to inculcate into the students that the starting couple of years would be tough financially. They cannot expect. Now, if every student going out of the university wants I-15 or I-16, whatever is, I don't have one though. So I-15 Pro Max, they need to earn it before they get it. But if they would like to have it, the shortest way of earning the money to buy your needs, it's not need, it's greed actually. Problem is the need could be boxed, but greed cannot be boxed. So that's why the students have to be told in universities and colleges that there has to be time when they can achieve everything financially. They expect something and then eventually they keep on sitting at home thinking that they should not do the job and losing year after year in desperation. So I think youth needs to be given much more of a responsibility while they are in education institutions also.
Thank you. I'm 5 minutes over time. I'm cognizant of that. So let me bring this to a close. But before I thank my panel, let me just say, I think, ma'am, you had asked this question, and I'll address one that you'd raised. One of the problems we face in higher education in Pakistan is that because the pipeline of 12 years of education before students come to a university is built around rote memorization and mechanical thinking, linear thinking, universities also tend to follow the same rut. So what we are producing at the end of the day as a country are linear thinking mechanics. These are all the jobs that AI is going to wipe out in the next 10 years. So a lot of people ask me this question, skills. And my response is absolutely skills. There have to be employable skills that come out of a university, but not without critical thinking, not without problem solving. You go to the Googles and Microsofts of the world, they're not asking for degrees anymore. They want to know whether you can think and resolve complex problems in simple ways. How do you do that? Humankind has only come up with one way of doing it. You break silos of disciplines and think broadly. You learn more than what you need to learn. So at BNU, one of the things that we are, at least I'm personally obsessed with, and there, frankly, the three things I would put on the table is civic sense, the importance of truth, and the importance of professional work ethic, which is really hard work. And it's a global problem for this generation, and I think that's where we want to push things at least. And on a lighter note, to end on a lighter note, sir, the idea about having the right person for the right job is exactly where we need to go. The problem is that the government has tried with people like me, and when we mess up, Umar's colleagues say, look what you did. Thank you very much for joining us. A big round of applause for our panel. Thank you. I think we have a souvenirs for the panelists, so may I request Professor Kiran and Professor Rashid, who are really the owners of this design summit, to please come and hand them over.